Welcome back to the Friday show presented by Monmouth Park. We've got Twilight Racing Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Racing begins at 12:15. Be sure to play the Win Early Pick 5 on Saturday and Sunday. It's the first Pick 5 bet in the country. They had a huge carryover last week, a big day of racing at Monmouth. I'm Ray Paulick, joined today by Natalie Voss, the editor-in-chief of the Paulick Report. And Natalie is up in Saratoga, it's always a busy place this time of the year with a lot of meetings, the Jockey Club Roundtable, which is virtual, but it's still, I think everybody is up there, the sales. And then to throw, a little activity on top of that, we've had the federal drug case involving Jorge Navarro, Jason Service, and others that has really kind of started to percolate with a couple of guilty pleas and lots of speculation. Natalie, why don't you bring our viewers up to date on basically what has happened in the last week to 10 days as far as the Navarro Service, Kristian Rhein, and all the other people that were indicted in March of 2020.
Right. So we've had a couple of new plea changes in the case. Jorge Navarro is the more high-profile one, but Kristian Rhein, his veterinarian, has also changed his plea to guilty. Both of them pled guilty to one charge. Navarro was originally charged with two felony counts of drug adulteration and misbranding conspiracy. I think Rhein was only ever on one, and he's pled guilty to that one. We don't know yet exactly how long their prison sentences might be, assuming that they are sentenced to prison. We don't know exactly what the financial implications might be, but we're sort of given some idea of the ranges that were set out by prosecutors in the plea agreements that both defendants signed. So we have some inkling, but sentencing for both of them won't take place until later this year.
We kind of expected some guilty pleas. That when the federal government does this kind of an investigation, a lot of the I think the vast majority of cases are actually settled with a plea. If they go to trial, I think the federal government has something like a 95% success rate in prosecuting cases. So the odds were not in Jorge Navarro's favor to fight this. Jason Service, on the other hand, filed a motion a week ago trying to quash all of the evidence that was gained through wiretaps, claiming that the government basically misled the federal court system that would approve wiretaps. So that appears to me to be kind of a Hail Mary. There's already evidence that's being built up through Jorge Navarro, for example, saying that he I think, distributed some of the performance-enhancing drugs to Jason Service. And I think Dr. Kristian Rhein said that he treated horses with performance-enhancing drugs, including maximum security.
Yes, he did. He and I think also prosecutors had specifically named maximum security, and they've given like a range of time in which Service and the others were treating horses with illegal medications. They've not really specified too much which races were impacted by those, other than we know that there was some out-of-competition testing done on maximum security in June of his 3-year-old year, and that Service was successful in evading any sort of positive test from that. Also, Navarro did specify yesterday to having treated XY Jet both before his allowance optional claimer prep race as well as the Dubai Golden Shaheen in 2019. And that was sort of as specific as they got with dates. Navarro did list off horses that he had treated with these medications also, and it's almost almost all his graded stakes horses, his top horses in Equibase, almost all of them were on that list. So
yeah, you mentioned XY Jet in Dubai. We've also got the maximum security winning the Saudi Cup, and as far as we know, that purse money is still being withheld. It's still on maximum security's record as winner of the race. That leads us to one of the questions we asked people on social media to send some questions to us concerning this case, and one of them came from Frank Mitchell, wondering, will the Jockey Club, Equibase, racing commissions start to nullify victories by horses that were trained by these guys? I don't know if they can.
I don't think that there's a provision for them to be able to do that. I mean, first of all, Jockey Club does not have that power, period. The state racing commissions, I think it's pretty well laid out in most states' rules, the context in which you can disqualify a horse from a race. And it's based on, events that take place in the race or the immediate post-race tests. And those horses cleared those tests. I don't think the states have any power to act beyond those specific guidelines that are given in their regulations. So I don't think we're going to see those victories stripped because the authorities that are in the position to disqualify do not have the power to do that under these specific circumstances.
The sentencing included some language about restitution that Navarro has to pay, and I think the number was $25 million. It seems highly unlikely he's going to go into his bank account and write a check for $25 million. But it kind of begs the question, and this was another question from one of our readers, Rebecca Lane, wondering, will the people who financially benefited from this cheating, aka the owners of the horses, will they somehow be brought into this? Because they're the ones that got the money. Navarro may have gotten 10%, or if he owns some of the horses, some of that. But what about the owners of these horses that were with Jason Service, Jorge Navarro, and some of the other trainers?
Well, I think, in Navarro's case, it's, it's a little bit more on him. My understanding when you and I had done some follow-up reporting on this last summer was that Navarro actually owned some percentage of almost every horse in his barn, whether it was a big enough percentage that it was, in the racing program or not. So as far as who was benefiting as the owner, I think that he actually is still at the end of that chain for a lot of the horses in his barn. But of course, Service and the others, that might not have been as true. There's, the payment and restitution, and then for both Navarro and for Kristian Rhein, there was a separate amount listed that's supposed to represent what they profited from as a result of their crimes. And that's considered to be a separate thing. It was quite a lot of money in Ryan's case. I think it was 7 figures. The amount that they gave in Navarro's case was only $70,000. And I'm not sure if they were accounting for, some percentage of the earnings of some horses. I'm not quite sure how they came up with that. But yeah, as far as we know, there are not owners currently who are indicted. I don't know if they would look at doing that in the future, but of course, then they would have to prove the owners were in some way involved in the conspiracy. One thing we did hear about yesterday with Navarro's change of plea hearing was that the prosecutors do have a recording of an owner on Nanouche, who was one of the horses that Navarro trained, confirming with him that the horse was going to continue receiving illegal drugs. We don't know what owner that was. The horse was owned by multiple groups. So I guess in that particular case, they do have evidence of an owner acknowledging that they were aware of this. But I would imagine in other situations that might not always be clear enough to bring charges against owners.
I think some of the owners can claim, whether this is true or not, that they didn't know, because I think as part of his plea, Jorge Navarro admitted to falsifying records to hide illegal drug treatment from some owners.
Yes.
So these are some of the things we know. Let's talk about some of the things we don't know. Where is this heading? Do you think this is the end of it? Do you think that we will see no more indictments? What is your gut feeling based on what you're seeing in court records? And also you have a lot of sources that may have some knowledge of this investigation. Where do you think it's heading?
I mean, I think that we've probably, both of us have been told since this began, every month or so we've been told, oh, this is going to be the month. They're going to arrest people next week. They're going to arrest people next month. What I've been hearing is they're going to arrest people by the end of the year. And so, obviously we're 18 months into this and we haven't seen anything else happen. I know that COVID delayed a lot of things, including, federal arrests because of the, biosecurity procedures that agents or law enforcement might have had to deal with. But, as these guilty pleas come in, one would assume, although I don't know because I haven't seen copies of the plea agreements yet, that part of the trade-off for the people pleading guilty is to provide whatever information they might have, to implicate others if there is an interest in implicating others. And so you do kind of wonder, okay, at what point do they have enough to go forward with this alleged second wave of indictments? So I would never be surprised if there is one, but it has also been 18 months of hearing that there's going to be one, and there hasn't been anything yet. So at this point, I don't even know. But, we were sort of, as I recall, Ray, we were both sort of woken up, each of us, our phones blowing up that March morning when they arrested the original 27. So every day that I wake up to my alarm and not to my phone text messages, I figure, well, okay, I guess it wasn't today. And you just never know.
Yeah, I wrote this week that I think this is just going to come down to how much does the federal government really care about this issue. They said they're going to continue to bring people to justice, but that just may be those that have already been indicted. There's got to be some nervous people out there, I would think.
You would hope so. You would hope that if somebody is doing something wrong, they would be nervous. But at the same time, if they've been doing something this terrible for as what was described in the indictments for the people they've already indicted, I'm not sure how much of a guilty conscience do you have? How much do you really worry about your actions at that point?
Well, we know that they have a lot of digital files. They have confiscated cell phones and computers, and I'm certain they would have some of the accounting records of the compounding laboratories that are involved in this. They've got a ton of evidence, and it may take some time to go through it. They've also got the wiretap phone calls, which we've had privy to through some of the indictments. But I think it just comes down to what does the government want out of this, and if there are no more indictments, where does this all go? Do the racing commissions just kind of look at it and yawn? Do we wait for the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority to go into effect and have them do something retroactively? I don't know.
Well, and I'm not clear what kinds of power would be available to HISA, especially retroactively, for something that occurred before they even existed. Right. I know that they're obviously dealing with medication and safety, but part of the reason this was able to happen is that there were private investigators as well as the FBI who had the ability to gather this evidence. And so I'm not sure whether the national authority is going to have a large enough kind of set of resources available to them as far as manpower and legal resources to do something similar in the future. So yeah, it's not clear to me at all where this is going to go beyond the purview of, federal prosecutors and the FBI.
Yeah, well, this whole, this whole thing, and I know you feel this way, it just makes you angry that it got to this point, because it's not just about defrauding the public and the other owners. And we've gotten emails from people saying, are they going to do anything about the wagers that were lost? Well, no, they're not going to do anything about the wagers that were lost. You can do a lawsuit if you want to, I suppose, or class action, but racing commissions are not going to overturn pari-mutuel results, so you can just forget about that. So you've got the integrity part of it, and then the part that I think a lot of people care about more is you're treating animals with some horrendous drugs, imported clenbuterol, with blood doping agents that Navarro admitted to. And we saw what happened to XY Jet. We don't know how he died, but we knew that it was a very seemingly unusual circumstance. So it's really disgusting from the standpoint that these people, some of them veterinarians, who take an oath, are doing this to animals.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the press releases that have come from the prosecutor's office in this case have specifically referred to it as abuse, and it is abuse. Yeah. They've been injecting substances that they don't know what it is. They don't know where it came from. They don't know if it's sterile. It's hard to imagine that horses were not injured or sickened by that behavior somewhere at some point. Unfortunately, we'll probably never really know. But what's also really frustrating about this too is I was on Nick Luck's podcast, which came out overnight or this morning, depending on what time zone you're in. And Nick Luck, of course, is a racing journalist based in Britain. And so they were asking me about the American perspective on Navarro. And one of the things that I was asked was, well, so like, what do Americans think about this? How are they feeling about this? And of course, it occurred to me that it was a good question. It was a worthwhile question to ask on their part. But part of the reason they wanted to know is that, of course, if you don't follow American racing all that closely, if you're over in Europe or if you're someplace else, you kind of know it through the lens of trainers who have gone abroad to run horses. And that includes Jason Service and Jorge Navarro, who have done so successfully. Yeah. So your kind of representation of American racing includes these guys. And they must have wondered, or must be wondering, like, so do the Americans worry about this? Are they angry? It may not even be immediately clear based on the fact that these high-profile trainers have represented us to the non-racing public in America, to the racing public in other countries. It may not be obvious just how furious most of us are and how intolerant most of us are of this kind of abusive behavior. And that makes it worse.
It also sort of begs the question of not just what do we think about it, but how many more are there? How many more people that have sent horses to Dubai or Saudi Arabia are, maybe they have different yet similar programs. We don't know.
Right.
We know that in the case of Jason Service and Jorge Navarro, they were putting up numbers that were just not realistic. And we see that with some other trainers that have not been indicted.
Right. And if anything, I think that I've been most interested in the guilty pleas from a couple of the drug producers who have already changed their plea. Right. Scott Robinson and Scott Mangini. And we don't know a ton yet about how big their operations were. We know a little bit about Medivet Equine and Michael Kegley with the SGF 1000. We don't know a lot about what the size of the operation of somebody like Seth Fishman might be. But it's clear that the guys that we do know about a little bit about their business, we're not just serving Service and Navarro. Right. They're kind of the origin from which, everything else grows. And it's clear that they're finding people to buy this stuff and presumably use it in a large enough scale for them to make quite a lot of money in a period of time. So, that was also something that I was asked on the podcast. So do you think this is, that's kind of the end of the cheating trainers and they've kind of got the bad apples out now? And he said, no, I mean, like, their entire business is based around exactly this kind of activity. We see them online with some frequency. There are some that haven't even really been named as far as like compounding pharmacies and sketchy websites that are not included in this indictment. And they're making a business selling this stuff to people. So unfortunately, yeah, I think this is just one piece of a much larger problem, which is infuriating and terrifying.
Yeah, I mentioned baseball earlier. I think baseball has largely cleaned up its drug problem, but we don't know that. Cycling, where Lance Armstrong had his 7 Tour de France titles taken away from him, there's speculation about the most recent Tour de France winner. So I'm not so sure that cycling has completely cleaned up its act. And I don't think horse racing has, hoping that things will change if and when HISA goes into effect next July, which is coming up sooner than a lot of people realize. But yeah, who knows where this is heading? It's not been fun to cover, to see a sport polluted with people like this.
No, and I have to say, it's not encouraging to be a comparatively young person choosing to work in this sport right now and thinking that this is the kind of person I'm working alongside, because we're all theoretically in this together in horse racing. And then you kind of look around at some of your teammates and go, oh, great. Like it's hard to feel good about that right now.
Well, I'm glad you're covering the sport. I'm glad you're covering it for the Paulick Report. Appreciate all you do. And I know that you'll continue to follow this case because it's a very important, no matter how sad or revolting it is, important chapter of the history of this game. Natalie Voss, thank you so much. And we'll be back after taking a look at this week's Woodbine Star of the Week. Joe Nevels is going to join us.
Forest Survivor is surviving this early speed pressure, turns in front. All Canadian second. In third, Jocularity, and down the centre is Galveston. Dragon's Bruce finishing well up the rail, but Forest Survivor bursts 3 or 4 lengths in front and is well ahead. Now Galveston is flying down the outside. It is Forest Survivor by 2 or 3 lengths to Galveston, and the win is for Forest Survivor by a length and 3/4 to Galveston in the Lake Huron. Jocularity third, Dragons Brew fourth. All Canadian took a shot and paid the price at the back, 57.33.
That's right. Our Woodbine Star of the Week is Forest Survivor, winner of the Lake Huron Stakes on August 7th. This is a 3-year-old son of the Canadian standard, Old Forester. Set some fast fractions in this turf sprint and had plenty to hang on in the stretch. Just a really nice effort here, something you can really build on.
Yeah, this is a group of Ontario breds, and this is a horse that was claimed for $25,000 last year by Norman McKnight. Went on to be stakes placed earlier this year. This was a good win, but watching that race, I just thought that's a long stretch. And that's not even the big turf course. That's the inner turf course that they just put in a few years ago. But he hung on, and he hung on well.
Yeah, did everything you want to see there. And, like I said, some really fast fractions, was the 1-2 favorite. So kind of ran the way you'd hope he'd run, but it was a good effort. And ridden in this race by Kazushi Kimura, excellent rider, the Sovereign Award winner for Champion Apprentice Jockey in 2018, won the North American title, the Eclipse Award for Apprentice Jockey in 2019. Currently Woodbine's leading rider by wins, and he's been consistent for a long time. The previous 2 meets, he finished in third in the jockey standings. If Kimura's riding your horse, you're going to be all right.
Well, that's our star of the week. Woodbine's got their big races are coming up here. Where, gradually they got the King Eddie this weekend. I think is it okay to call King Edward King Eddie? Because I think even the track announcer refers to it that way.
I think his friends might call him King Eddie.
Well, that's going to do it for the Friday show this week. Thanks to Monmouth Park for their sponsorship. Thanks to Woodbine. Thanks to Natalie Voss for helping a lot of us understand the Navarro case better and the whole federal indictment case. And Joe, we'll talk to you again next week. Thanks for joining us this week on the Friday show.